There is a man in Japanese history who won over 60 duels and never, not even once, explained why he did what he did. And the reason he never felt the need to explain himself is the exact same thing that will set you free today. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling utterly drained, even though you didn't argue, even without ever raising your voice? Have you ever spent hours afterward replaying every single sentence you said, trying to figure out where you went wrong, even while knowing deep down that you did nothing wrong at all? This has a name. And curiously enough, the answer to this exhaustion didn't come from a modern psychologist. It came from a 17th century Japanese warrior who spent his entire life being called strange, arrogant, and antisocial, and who, despite all of that, became the most legendary swordsman in the history of Japan. His name was Miyamoto Musashi, and there is a fascinating detail about his life that most people fail to apply to their own lives today. He never wasted a single second trying to make people understand his choices, not even when they hated him for it. Perhaps this is one of your greatest desires today, the ability to not feel the urge to explain yourself, the power to stop seeking understanding from the people around you. Yet, even when trying to change, so many people still feel forced to justify their actions or strive to be understood by everyone. Today you will understand exactly what he knew about posture, about the mind, about silence, and why giving up the need to be understood might just be the most liberating decision you will ever make. I know it's not easy, but through this video, where I will also introduce you to 3 core concepts, kamae, fudōshin, and mushin, you will realize that this is entirely possible and that it is genuinely liberating. Chapter 1. The Cost of Being Easy to Understand. This story begins with a man named Derek, a 34-year-old financial consultant, the kind of person everyone describes as so easy to get along with. He never argues. He never leaves anyone waiting for a response. He never walks out of a room without making sure everyone understands exactly why he did what he did. It sounds like a virtue. For years, Derek thought it was too, except there was a pattern he could never quite explain, not even to himself. Every time he made a simple decision, turning down an invitation, disagreeing with an idea, asking for an extension on a deadline, he felt an almost physical urge to justify it in great detail. It wasn't enough to just say no. He had to explain the reason, then check to make sure the person wasn't upset, and then, often enough, reassure them again the next day that everything was fine between them. One Saturday, after declining a family dinner and spending 40 minutes on the phone trying to ensure his mother didn't feel hurt, Derek hung up and felt a profound exhaustion. Not physical. An exhaustion that came from somewhere else. As if he had spent an entire day's worth of energy on a negotiation that shouldn't have existed in the first place. He began noticing the pattern everywhere. At work, whenever he disagreed with a colleague, he spent twice as much time softening the disagreement as he did actually defending his stance. With friends, if someone misinterpreted one of his jokes, Derek would rewrite entire messages, trying to fix the impression, sometimes 3-4 times, until the phrasing sounded impossible to misunderstand. Then there was Marina, a longtime friend. During a game night, she made a comment about Derek's love life that, beneath the playful tone, actually stung. He laughed it off in the moment, as he always did, just to avoid ruining the mood. But on the way home, he decided to send a carefully worded message explaining that that specific remark had hurt him. Marina's reply came fast. "Oh, come on, relax, it was just a joke." Derek reread his own message 3 times and rewrote it twice, desperately searching for words that would make it crystal clear he wasn't angry with her, just explaining his feelings. In the end, he deleted everything and simply replied, "All good, no worries." The lingering feeling was the same as always, having swallowed something real just to keep things comfortable for the other person. And even so, people kept misunderstanding him, because deep down people weren't reacting to him. They were reacting to their own interpretation of him, and no amount of explaining can ever change an interpretation that has already been decided. If you recognized yourself in this, pay attention over the next few days to how many times you rephrase a sentence, resend a message, or repeat an explanation just to make sure nobody walks away with the wrong impression of you. Simply observe this behavior as it happens and repeats, Because before you can break this pattern, you must first see just how often it runs your life. Chapter 2. The Man Who Never Explained Himself. It was during a sleepless night that Derek stumbled, almost by accident, upon a biography of a Japanese swordsman named Miyamoto Musashi. And what he read in those first few pages completely reshaped the way he thought about being understood. Musashi was born around 1584, and while still a young teenager, he was already facing opponents in deadly duels. Over his lifetime, he fought and won over 60 battles. He was never once defeated. Yet contrary to what you might expect of someone so legendary, Musashi was not well liked by most of his contemporaries. He was described as strange, solitary. Many claimed he didn't follow the rules, that he was too arrogant to belong to any traditional sword school. Derek kept reading. He discovered that Musashi's very first duel took place when he was only 13 years old, against an experienced adult samurai named Arima Kihei. No one expected the boy to survive. Musashi won by throwing his opponent to the ground and striking him repeatedly until the end, with a style so raw and outside formal standards that many deemed it dishonorable. He didn't care what they thought. He moved forward. His only goal was to survive. Throughout his adult life, Musashi also refused to serve any feudal lord permanently, something virtually unheard of for a warrior of that era, when serving a clan guaranteed status, income, and protection. He chose instead to live as a ronin, a masterless samurai, free yet stripped of the security that came with belonging to an established structure. Many historians note that this choice fueled much of the reputation for being erratic and unpredictable that followed him his whole life. Musashi knew the exact price of that choice, and he chose to pay it anyway. The most famous duel of Musashi's life took place on a small island called Ganryujima, against a swordsman named Sasaki Kojiro, who was considered unbeatable up to that moment. And Musashi did something that outraged everyone present. He arrived hours late on purpose, leaving his opponent furious, baking in the sun, losing his composure before the first blow was even struck. Meanwhile, on his boat ride to the island, Musashi carved his own wooden sword out of a spare oar. He won the duel with a single strike. Afterward, he never publicly explained why he had arrived late. He never justified using a wooden sword against an opponent armed with forged steel. He let people speculate, criticize, and interpret it however they wanted. He knew something that Derek, centuries later, was still trying to learn. Explaining yourself to someone who has already made up their mind doesn't change their decision. It only drains your life force. In his final years, Musashi retreated into isolation inside a cave called Reigando, in the mountains near Kumamoto. There, completely alone, he wrote the Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings, one of the most studied strategic treatises in history, studied centuries later by warriors, executives, and athletes alike. And just days before his death, still inside that cave, he wrote a second, shorter, and deeply personal text, the Dokodo, the Path of Aloneness. 21 precepts he wrote for himself, not to convince a single soul. Derek closed the book that night with a haunting question he couldn't shake. What if he was spending his entire life trying to be understood by people whom Musashi would have simply left to speculate? Today, choose a recent situation where you felt misunderstood. Instead of imagining how you could have explained yourself better, ask yourself, did this person truly want to understand, or had they already made up their mind before I even opened my mouth? A sincere answer to this question will immediately change how you handle the next encounter. Because some people don't want to understand your side of the story. They only want to validate what they already believe about you. Think about that. Chapter 3. Kamae, the stance that betrays you. In Japanese martial arts, there is a concept known as kamae. Put simply, it refers to combat posture, the stance a swordsman adopts before striking, with the body, feet, and blade positioned in a specific way. Musashi taught something that contradicted virtually every other sword school of his era. A true master should never lock themselves into a single fixed stance, because a fixed stance, no matter how strong it appears, possesses a fatal flaw. It becomes predictable, And in combat, the predictable is the first to fall. A swordsman who always adopts the exact same guard unconsciously hands their pattern over to the enemy. The opponent learns to read every motion before it even happens. Musashi wrote that the ideal stance adapts to the moment, free from attachment to any fixed form, because rigidity, even when it looks like strength, hides deep vulnerability. Now consider how you present yourself to the people around you. Most of us unconsciously construct a kind of social kamae, a fixed version of ourselves, the nice one, the funny one, the one who always agrees, the one who never makes trouble, held rigidly in place so everyone always knows what to expect. And for years this feels like safety. It feels like positive predictability. Yet there is a hidden cost to this rigid stance. The people around you learn exactly how to read you, exactly which pressure points to press to get what they want, and exactly which argument will make you back down. And the moment you try to shift, to disagree, to refuse, to change, the entire system reacts as if something is broken. Because all this time, your predictability was serving them, not just you. A social psychologist studying group dynamics explains this phenomenon. Social groups develop fixed expectations for each member, and any departure from those expectations generates collective discomfort, even when the change is positive. The human brain confuses predictability with safety, and any break in that pattern is interpreted, however falsely, as a threat. Musashi took this principle of the fluid, dynamic posture so seriously that throughout his entire adult life, he never settled down in one place. He lived for decades in constant wandering, with no permanent home, no fixed school, and no lifelong allegiance to any master. Even more remarkably, accounts say he avoided taking regular baths because he refused to leave himself vulnerable, even for a second, to an ambush while unarmed. By the standards of his time, it sounded like madness. To Musashi, it was total alignment with what he taught. No fixed stance, nowhere at any time. Now look at the fixed roles you play in your relationships. The child who never argues, the employee who never says no, the friend who always tags along. Choose one of these roles, and over the next few days, break it in a small, deliberate way. It doesn't need to be a major confrontation, just enough to remind yourself that this role was always a choice, never an obligation. Chapter 4. Fudōshin, the immovable mind. Derek decided to put what he was learning to the test. The following week, during a team meeting, he openly disagreed with a decision made by his manager. Calmly, directly, without the usual lengthy preamble, apologizing in advance for having a different view. The meeting ended without any drama, but over the next few days he noticed subtle shifts. One colleague joked that Derek had been acting a bit tough lately. Another stopped inviting him to the casual Friday lunch. Nobody said anything directly, but the atmosphere had changed. Derek's old instinct would have kicked in instantly. Fix the impression, explain that it wasn't personal, and reassure everyone that he was still the same reliable person. But he remembered the second concept he had read about Musashi. Fudōshin, the immovable mind. Fudōshin means feeling the full weight of a provocation and still holding your ground. Musashi wrote that a true warrior faces the hostility of an opponent the way a mountain faces the wind. It feels the force, the leaves may sway, but the mountain remains unmoved. Derek understood for the very first time the difference between two things he had always confused: caring about people versus needing their approval just to exist as he was. He could genuinely care about a co-worker's discomfort without having to undo his own stance just to restore that person's peace of mind. The following week, when the same co-worker made another sarcastic remark about Derek's new attitude, Derek didn't correct him, didn't explain, and didn't try to soften the blow. He simply smiled slightly and said, "Could be," and moved on to his next task. The remarks never came back. Weeks later, Derek realized something fascinating. The people who drifted away because of his shift were never actually his closest allies. They were simply the ones who profited from the old version of him, the version that always gave in, always smoothed things over, and always absorbed everyone else's discomfort to keep the peace. The relationships that survived the change, on the other hand, felt significantly lighter, as if they no longer had to carry an edited version of who he was. And that is exactly what happens when you decide to change your posture. The people who only stood beside you because they benefited from your compliance will begin to drift away. So the next time someone reacts poorly to a decision you make, resist the automatic urge to explain yourself all over again. Wait at least one full day before deciding if it truly warrants a reply. Most of the time, you will find that silence accomplished what an explanation never could. Chapter 5. Mushin, acting without an internal audience. There was, however, one problem Derek still hadn't solved. Even when he managed to stop explaining himself out loud, he kept doing it on the inside, rehearsing responses for conversations that might never happen, mentally replaying old arguments, trying to craft the flawless version of himself that no one could ever misjudge. Returning to the Go-Rin no-show, he discovered the third concept of his journey, Mushin, the mind of no mind. Musashi doesn't explicitly rely on the term Mushin, but he dedicates the entire final chapter of his work to explaining this exact concept. He speaks of it in the Book of the Void, Kuno Maki. Musashi wrote that a swordsman who enters combat calculating every move, constantly worrying about how spectators are judging him, has already lost half the battle before the first strike. True mastery occurs when action flows directly from the situation itself, without passing through the relentless filter of an internal audience evaluating every single gesture. It means stopping the inner judge that narrates every movement, as if you were on trial every second, before an audience that isn't even in the room. Not by turning off your intelligence, but by freeing yourself from the constant filter of other people's judgment. In his final days, alone in the cave of Reigando, Musashi wrote the Dokodo, 21 precepts summarizing everything he had learned about living without the need for external validation. He wrote, among other things, that one should think lightly of oneself and deeply of the world. That resentment and complaint should have no place, whether directed inward or outward. That one should walk their path unshaken by parting, rejection, or judgments outside their control, and that no one should ever depend on fleeting emotions or outside approval to determine their own worth. Derek reread those 21 rules multiple times that week. He noticed that not a single one spoke of convincing, proving, or correcting anyone else's perception. Every single one pointed inward. It was as if Musashi, in his final days, had condensed an entire lifetime into one quiet truth. The work was never about changing how others see you. It was always about no longer needing to. Go researcher studying social anxiety describes this mechanism from another angle. When an individual maintains continuous self-monitoring during social interactions, the brain treats that vigilance as an active survival threat. It is physically exhausting because the nervous system reacts as if it were under constant evaluation for survival, even in a routine workplace conversation. Derek began practicing this in small ways. In a meeting, instead of mentally rehearsing the perfect sentence before speaking, he simply spoke his mind, allowing the phrasing to form naturally in the moment. At first, it felt risky. Some sentences came out less polished than he would have liked, but alongside that risk came something unexpected, an inner stillness he hadn't felt in years. The audience inside his head was, little by little, finally leaving the room. At various points, we go through this exact struggle. This endless self-analysis where we feel the need to calculate every word, every move, every reaction, and it is utterly exhausting. Yet once we break through that barrier, we see that things flow completely naturally. Over the next few days, pick one conversation, even a minor one, and enter it committed not to rehearsing what you will say. Speak what needs to be said, in the moment it needs to be said, without seeking prior internal approval. You will likely realize just how much daily energy you were burning on an invisible rehearsal that no one but you even knew was happening. And that will be liberating. Chapter 6. The Void That Follows. The final chapter of the Go-Rin no-show isn't about sword techniques at all. As mentioned earlier, Musashi called it the Book of the Void, Kuno Maki. And in it, he wrote something that distills everything he had taught up to that point. True mastery happens when a person outgrows the need for any fixed form, any memorized technique, and any urge to prove anything to an onlooker. The void for Musashi was the freedom left behind once you stopped carrying what was never truly yours, other people's expectations, inherited roles, and the endless need for translation. In his final years, besides being a swordsman, Musashi became a painter, sculptor, and calligrapher, a rare path for a warrior of his era. His ink paintings of birds and landscapes, created with swift, unhesitating brushstrokes, are celebrated as masterpieces of Japanese art today. Scholars note that the same mind that mastered the blade mastered the brush, because to Musashi, there was no real division between the two. He called this principle Ken Zen Ichi, the unity of the sword and the mind. Outward technique, whatever form it took, only reached perfection when it stopped being a conscious effort and became a direct extension of who he already was, without needing validation from anyone watching the brushstroke or the cut of the blade. The true test of Derek's transformation came months later at a family gathering. An uncle, using that half-joking tone that conceals a disguised jab, remarked that Derek seemed distant lately, much more closed off. The entire table chuckled, anticipating the usual response. A long explanation, a disguised apology, an effort to restore his familiar image. Derek simply smiled calmly and replied, "I'm doing well, I've just learned to choose more carefully where I spend my energy." There was no defensiveness in the sentence, there was no hidden apology, it was just a simple truth spoken without rush. Then brief silence hung over the table. Months earlier, that silence would have sent Derek into a panic, rushing to fill the void with justifications. This time, he let the silence be. Seconds later, the conversation naturally moved on, just like any comment that finds no reaction to feed on. On the drive home, Derek finally understood what Musashi meant by the void. The rigid stance was gone, the urge to explain was gone, the internal audience was gone, and what remained was the space to simply exist, without needing to translate that existence for anyone. There is one final detail about Musashi's last days that very few people know. He completed the Dokudo just days before passing away, alone, with no audience, no disciples standing by waiting to applaud. He didn't write it to be read by crowds. He wrote it for himself as a final act of integrity with the life he had lived. Even at the very end, he felt no need to explain himself to anyone. If you made it this far, you've probably recognized yourself in Derek at some point in your life, and you might be wondering where to start applying this in practice. It took Musashi decades to reach the void. You only need to take the first steps in the right order. For the next 3 days, your only job is to observe. Before reacting to any judgment or misunderstanding, notice whether the urge to explain comes from a genuine need to clarify something important or from an automatic fear of displeasing someone. That awareness alone will transform how you process every interaction. After that, choose a single situation each week to practice Musashi's fluid stance. Break, in a small and controlled way, a rigid role you have always played with someone specific. This reminds your own nervous system that this posture was always a choice, never an obligation, without needing any dramatic confrontation to prove your point. Alongside this, begin adopting silence as your default response to minor criticisms. Before offering an automatic explanation, wait at least a few hours. Most of the time, you will realize the urgency to explain yourself has simply vanished on its own. And finally, pay attention to how much mental bandwidth you waste rehearsing conversations that haven't even happened. Every time you catch yourself rehearsing, bring your focus right back to the present moment, to the real action happening right now, not to the hypothetical version being judged by an audience that may not even exist. These 4 practices, sustained with consistency, will not transform your life overnight. But week after week, they will guide you closer to the place Musashi spent a lifetime reaching. The freedom to exist without needing translation. In the end, Derek's journey illustrates the profound difference between caring for someone and needing their approval just to remain who you are. Letting go of empathy was never the goal. The rigid posture you maintain just to appear predictable carries a hidden cost no one warns you about. The mind that is shaken by every passing judgment bleeds energy that belongs elsewhere, and the internal audience, narrating your every move before it even happens, is the greatest silent thief of your peace. Musashi lived a lifetime being labeled strange, arrogant, and hard to understand. And yet he died peacefully alone in a cave, fully at peace with every choice he made, without needing anyone to validate the path he walked. People will continue to misunderstand you. That is practically guaranteed. The real question is, how much more of your life are you willing to spend trying to correct them? If this video shifted the way you view the need to be understood, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the upcoming teachings on this journey. And leave a comment below. Which rigid role are you going to break this week? Understand that the most vital thing is knowing exactly who you are, rather than exhausting yourself trying to project an image for everyone else. Of course, leaving a good impression is nice, but the real danger begins when you spend all your energy trying to shift the perspective of people who don't truly care about you, people who have already made up their minds and are simply looking to validate their own opinions, waiting for you to stumble so they can judge you. Just be yourself. Strive to be better for the people who truly matter, and never again remain trapped in the exhausting need to explain and prove yourself. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and remember, be present, walk with honor, follow the way. Until the next video.